So big money versus big freedom. There are two reasons to become an entrepreneur: to make the big money or to go for the flexibility and the lifestyle and the freedom. I got some notes here. So I've been an entrepreneur my entire adult life. I started my first business. I started planning the business when I was 17. I sort of launched it part-time while I was going to school. When I was 18, I started doing little deals and so on. At the same time, I was working as a bouncer in a nightclub to pay the bills, and I was a bouncer because I was able to work nights, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, sometimes Wednesday, and it would free up the rest of the week and the days for me to go to school and or to sort of try to get the business going. And then what happened to me is that it's been a long time, so excuse me if my months are off. So around 18 or 19 years old, late 18, maybe 19 years old, I got a very serious blood disorder, and long story short, it almost killed me. And I was on heavy duty drugs, prednisone, danazol, and a few others just to keep my blood levels in a safe level. Basically, I had a bleeding disease, so like I would fall asleep, and the next day my head would be all bruised from just the weight of my head on the pillow. Yeah, I have a pretty big head, but it shouldn't happen. Anyway, so what happened to me was, there's a reason I'm talking the blood disease story. It affected my decisions in terms of my business career. So I have this blood disease. I'm fighting it for about 9 months to a year, and through Chinese herbs, believe it or not, my chronic incurable disease, I was able to cure it with the help of a Chinese herbalist and medical doctor. It's another story if people want to hear about it. And so here I am, while I was getting the treatment, when you're on heavy-duty steroids, I was going mental. I was getting extremely erratic and angry, and from the steroids, it just amps you up. So it's like you're having a bad day every day. And so what happened is my GPA, my grade point average, my GPA started to drop. Not that it was great to begin with, but it started to drop quite a bit because of, you're always in a rage because you're jacked up on massive steroids. So I decided to take a leave from school. When I said, hey, I'm sick, I said, okay, take a leave, and I was going to come back. So I took a leave from school, and at the same time, I quit the bouncing job because when you have a bleeding disease, you can't have a bouncing job. So then my business was there on the side. And it was sort of percolating. It was starting to move. There's always an inertia period when you're starting a business, especially when you're really young. You got to understand, when I started my business at 18, it was not like today. Today, everybody is aware of becoming an entrepreneur. It's much more acceptable in the culture almost for young people to get into entrepreneurial lifestyle. It's also a lot easier today because of technology. That's why I was thinking of calling my business battle plan course. I was going to call it EntrepreNERD, because today any entrepreneur, no matter what type of business you're in, whether you're in a technology-related business or a restaurant or you're a butcher or you're a lawyer, whatever, you need to have an understanding of technology so that you can leverage it. I'm talking understanding the basics of what it takes to build a website so you can make informed decisions, the basics of social media and social media marketing, again, so you can make informed business decisions. So even if you, as an entrepreneur, you're not going to implement your social media marketing strategy, you're not going to build your site, if you know the basics of HTML and CSS, you just know the basics of it, you will be able to make smart decisions, be able to talk to nerds, programmers, developers, web designers, web developers. You'll be able to talk to them and explain to them exactly what you're looking for in your site. And it will save you a lot of money and a lot of headaches. In fact, one of my friends, he has a business that does $2 million a year or something, and he tells me that one of the most important skills he ever learned was just basic HTML and CSS, basic stuff. Not that he writes code, but just by understanding that, again, he's able to communicate with developers and designers, and he's able to get things done much more quickly than he would have otherwise, especially in the beginning when he's short on money. Having those basic skills made it easy for him to put up his WordPress site. And his business, though it's not technology, his website, which is WordPress based, is like key to his whole business. That makes his business. Anyway, went off on a tangent, my apologies. So, I'm a young kid. I'm coming out of this blood disease. I just dropped out of school because I was destroying my GPA. And I said to myself, I was studying psychology, and it's like, I went after I quit as a bouncer because I couldn't get punched with a bleeding disease. I took a gig, not a job, but a gig as a contract working in a cinema, just doing random maintenance and cleanup. Again, I was able to work at night, freeing up my days for my business now. Now I didn't go to school. And I decided to drop out of school permanently at this point. I had intentions of going back, but I never ended up going back as the business started working. I decided not to go back because I was doing my undergrad in psychology, and I realized all the popcorn girls, they all had master's degrees in psychology. And I realized, well, I could pop popcorn without a master's degree. So, the value of it diminished quite a bit. And I also said to myself, I almost died at 18, 19. I can't afford to wait 8 years before, because you do psychology, you're looking at least 8 years before you could find yourself in employment if you're lucky enough. Even back then it was hard. Today, I don't know, forget about it. And so I said, I'm going to go full-time in business, see what happens. So I went full-time in business and became a workaholic. Let's fast forward a few years. At one point, you have to make a choice with your business when you have success. And I think it's inevitable you can have success if you structure your process properly, and you're consistent, and you're persistent, and you're self-aware, and you're self-critical, and you're able to see opportunity. These are all these things I discuss in my course on this subject. But at one point, you have to decide if you're going to go for the big money or the big freedom. The big money or the big freedom. And because of my health issues, and because, I don't know, my blood disease went away, but who knows, it could come back again 5 years later, 10 years later. It happens all the time, right? So I said to myself, I'm going to go for big freedom instead. So what happened is that when the company and my earnings got to a point where it was not only covering all my bills, but I was able to save 50, 60, 80% on the dollar. And through passively, essentially, through residuals and just through the machinations of the business, because I wasn't selling my time, I was selling a service, that I said, I'm going to take it easy. So I hit into early retirement, if you will, at 32 officially. I could have done it like a couple of years earlier, but I wanted to be sure everything was steady Eddie, and I had developed a nice big stash of FU. And then I just went into early retirement, and for about 8-9 years, I had enough in my business. I would work maybe an hour a week on it, maybe, and I would do all kinds of different things. I've since got back in because I saw other opportunity. Studio Web is one of the things. And also, after 8-9 years of drinking coffee and having brunch with people, it was time to do something. In fact, you get bored. Even though I was doing things, but it was just unrelated to business. Again, when you go into business, at some point, when the thing starts to move, you have to sort of decide if you're going to be going for, I said, the big money or the big freedom. And the two don't coincide, right? You have to assume that you're not going to be the next Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs. These are unicorns. These are very rare, lucky people. Not taken away, but there's a huge amount of luck involved. And the strategy, in fact, in business, entrepreneurial activities, if you will, is to hedge your bets, meaning is to not expect huge successes, to be more aware of the potential failures, and to build up positions. One of the big illusions, one of the big myths in business is that you come up with a brilliant idea and then you execute and it's fantastic and you make a fortune. It never happens that way. The way the big businesses and the big successes come about, and the small successes, is a process of refinement and iterations, just like software development. You come up with an initial idea and you put it out there and you get feedback from people, and then you start making changes accordingly. Studio Web is an example of that. It's gone through major iterations over the years to adapt according to the needs of the client base. And it continues, although it's pretty solid now. So you got to think of it that way. So big freedom versus big money. At some point, you can scale up the business, which will be a huge amount of work. And at some point, you can set it up so it becomes really self-sustaining, and it more than pays your bills, and you can accumulate wealth. Most people get rich through a slow and steady process of making 3, 4, 5 times the average person as opposed to 1,000 times the average person. But if you're making 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times more than the average person, every year you make what the average person makes in 7, 8 years, in a few years you can retire, right? And I'll leave you with this, an old story I remember back in the day when I was still a young nerdling entrepreneur nerd. And I remember I was listening to an interview with an entrepreneur who had retired, and they said, it took me 10 years, this guy said, it took me 10 years to figure out how to do it, and then just 2 years to get it done. Same thing happened with me, by the way. So that's why I'm putting out these videos. I'm moving out towards entrepreneur and code, EntrepreNERD, because I have my coding courses cover basically what you need to know, and you can go in any direction, whether you want to be a professional developer or you want to be an entrepreneur and leverage technology. It's all there, so I don't need to get into that anymore. So I figure I'm going to bring in the business end and the entrepreneurial aspect of setting up and starting a business, because this is a skill set that I've been coding since the 90s, but I've been an entrepreneur before that. I have several more years experience as a business operator. And so I figure I'm going to bring this to my vlogs. We'll see how people like it or not. All right, that's it. Bye.